Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good day everyone. Okay, so thank you for joining us for this important forum discussion. Okay, my name is Irdina Batrisyia, Binti Mohammad Rashidi, and I will be moderating for today's discussion. So actually I am a criminology analyst that works in the intersection of crime and societal dynamics with a focus on victim support and advocacy. So in today's forum, a critical issue will be discussed in this forum. So the issue is not only affecting Malaysians but also millions worldwide. Okay, so the topic of this forum is actually behind closed doors, combating domestic violence and also supporting victims. Okay, but before we go through more into this discussion, I would like to introduce our panelists that will be joining us for today. Okay, so first, okay, we have Miss Husna Hakim. She's a sociologist that specializes in the study of family dynamics and societal factors that contribute to domestic violence. Well, she have conducted various researches on the psychological and societal impacts of abuse, making she is well suited to discuss the scope and forms of domestic violence today. Okay, so next we have Mr. Syazwie. He's a legal expert that work on cases involving domestic violence and he is passionate about strengthening legal protections for the victims. So today he will share his insight into the legal frameworks, roles of law enforcement, and challenges in combating domestic violence. And finally, we have Miss Husna Aisha. She is a social worker and advocate for survivors of domestic violence with years of experience in supporting victims through counseling and rehabilitation programs. She will share on how community dynamics influence domestic violence and will highlight ways of survivors can access vital support services. Okay, so in today's forum, our goal is to uncover not only the challenges but also the actionable solutions to fight domestic violence. Okay, so each panelist will share their insights, followed by a brief discussion where we connect their ideas together. Okay, so before we start, go through into detail, let me explain briefly on what is actually domestic violence. Okay, domestic violence is actually a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship used by one partner to gain or maintain control over another. Okay, it's not only between husband and wife. It also can happen between the parents and also their kids. Okay. It also can take many forms such as physical, emotional, psychological, financial, or even sexual abuse. So, relatedly to our topic of our forum, this issue often remains hidden behind closed door. Easily say it happens within the family members or within the house. Okay, so to effectively combat this issue, we must tackle it on multiple fronts through awareness, legal action, and also comprehensive support system for victims. So to not waste any more time, okay, let's begin with hearing from our first panelist, Ms. Husna Hakim, who will provide an overview of the dynamic and scope of domestic violence.
All right, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss on issue that affect countless individuals worldwide, domestic violence. The definition provided by our moderators captures the essence of these issues well, and I would like to expand on the example shared before, which is domestic violence comes in many forms, and it's essential to recognize that domestic violence extend beyond physical harm. So, what is physical abuse? Physical abuse includes acts like hitting, choking, or any action aimed at causing injury. And emotional or psychological abuse involve manipulation, constant humiliation, and threat for to damage the self-esteem of the victim and create fear. So, what is sexual abuse? So, technically, sexual abuse refers to any non-consensual sexual activity or coercion. And lastly, economic abuse is another form where financial independence is restricted, access to money is controlled, or financial dependency is intentionally created. And I'm sorry, the, the real final for abuse is digital abuse. So in our world, right now, the technology involved in stalking, intimidating, or controlling someone's life. So the prevalence of domestic violence is deeply concerning. According to WHO, the World Health Organization, 1 in 3 women globally experience physical or sexual violence during their lifetime. And while men can also be victims, women are disproportionately affected and often face more severe forms of abuse. So, several factors contribute to domestic violence, such as cultural norms, gender inequalities, and normalized power imbalances. So, in economic stress, it includes poverty and unemployment, and it also can increase tension within the household, specifically the husband or the breadwinner. Okay. And lastly, the substance abuse, such as involving alcohol or drugs, can also intensify violence behavior. Additionally, a history of family violence can perpetuate the cycle as exposure to abuse during childhood, and it also can be a pattern when it comes to adulthood. So the effect of domestic violence are profound and far-reaching, and victim can face physical injuries, emotional trauma, or it also can make social isolation, which can deeply impact their well-being and quality of their life. So by understanding and addressing this issue, we can work toward a society where safety and dignity are upheld for everyone. So
Okay,
that's all
thank
from
you.
you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Hakim. Okay, so thank you for the true overview of the forms and impacts of domestic violence. Okay, open wide has been discussed. Now, Mr. Syazwan will now delve into the legal framework surrounding domestic violence, examining the current protection in place, the challenges within the law enforcement, and also the potential areas for improvement in our legal system.
Thank you, Moderator. Assalamualaikum and very good morning to all. It's an honor to discuss an issue as critical as domestic violence, which has far-reaching impacts on individuals and communities. Building on the earlier point by Ms. Husna Hakim, we understand that the various forms of abuse and their effects on our victims. Now, I will focus on the legal landscape, including protections, challenges, and also areas for improvement. In Malaysia, the Domestic Violence Act 1994 (DVA) is the main law addressing domestic violence. This act, which has been amended over time, recognizes physical, emotional, and also psychological abuse and empowers courts to issue protections order (POs) for immediate victim relief. The Penal Code and Child Act 2001 further support this by addressing related crimes like assault and child abuse. However, effective law enforcement remains a challenge. Police officers are often the first responders, and specialized units like Sexual, Women and Child Investigation Division (D11) play a vital role. But victims still face barriers, including dismissive attitudes and delays in police response, which discourage reporting. To address this, law enforcement officers need to continue training in trauma-informed practices, ensuring a supportive environment for victims. Despite legal protections, gaps remain in victim support. Many victims are unaware of their legal rights, and inconsistent enforcement of protections orders leaves them vulnerable. Cultural barriers and stigma also prevent many from seeking justice, while overburdened courts and shelters contribute to delay assistance. As Ms. Husna Hakim mentioned before, societal and economic factors also play a significant role in domestic violence. To address these gaps, several solutions are necessary. First, the DVA should be expanded to include financial abuse. Law enforcement training should be updated regularly to reflect evolving societal needs, ensuring officers handle cases with care. Accessibility can be improved by establishing more legal aid centers, particularly in rural areas, and simplifying the process for obtaining protection orders. And finally, raising awareness through collaborations with NGOs and media can educate the public on legal protections and resources available to combat domestic violence. Thank you, and now I will pass it back to our moderator.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Syazwan, for the insight share on the legal aspects of domestic violence and the necessary improvements mentioned before. Okay, now as we move from legal frameworks to a more community-centered approach, so I will ask Miss Aisyah, Husna Aisyah. She will discuss the critical role of community dynamics in addressing domestic violence, as well as the support system available to the survivors. So please.
Thank you, I'm a moderator, and hello everyone. So, as we all know, domestic violence is a pervasive issue in our society. And while we have made strides in supporting survivors, such as the laws and regulations that Mr. Syazwan mentioned earlier, there's still so much work need to be done. So now, I will actually discuss the role of community dynamics in domestic violence and also the support services that are available for our survivors. Okay, first of all, social disorganization theory actually, it explains about how communities with weakened social bonds, economic instability, and poor access to resources often see higher rates of domestic violence. And not just domestic violence, but crimes in general. But why is that? So actually, because these factors reduce collective efficacy, the ability of community members to look out for one another and intervene when needed. Conversely, tight-knit communities with strong social bonds often see lower levels of violence because there's an unspoken accountability. When people know each other well, there's a shared understanding that actions affect the whole group. In such communities, individuals are more likely to be held responsible for their actions, for their behavior, as their action may affect the whole group. So, this is why victims feel they have someone to turn to for. So, this is why victims feel they have someone to turn to for support, making them feel less likely to suffer alone. So, the main point here is that when we strengthen communities by fostering connection, reducing poverty, and increasing access to services, we actually disrupt the cycle of domestic violence. Okay, now let's talk about the support services that are available for our survivors. First and foremost, the role of schools and universities. Educational institutions is crucial in both addressing domestic violence and preventing it. By teaching about healthy relationships, boundaries, and consent, schools and universities can actually help in preventing abusive behaviors. For survivors that are actually students, this institution can provide safe spaces, counseling, and even connect survivors with external resources to ensure comprehensive support. And secondly, let's talk about emergency shelters and hotline. Shelters provide immediate safety for survivors that are fleeing violence. However, their availability is very limited in rural areas. Hotlines, on the other hand, are a lifeline for those in crisis. They connect survivors with trained professionals who offer emotional support, guidance on accessing shelters, and also counseling services. To anyone enduring domestic violence, whether it happened only once or like 100 times, please seek help. Help are available everywhere. And you are not alone. Please reach out if you are one of the victims of domestic violence. So I want to conclude that together, by being part of a healthy and supportive community, by raising awareness, advocating for better access to shelters and keeping hotlines operational, we can actually ensure that no survivor is left behind. Thank you, and with that, I'll return it back to our moderator.
Okay, so thank you, Mrs. Naisha, for the insights shared. Okay, so actually we have received few questions from our viewers of today's discussion. We can see in the comments. Okay, so I'll be picking a few questions given from the viewer. Okay, so The first question is from Alia Hanis. Okay, so this person asks about the societal factors that perpetuate domestic violence and how can awareness help? Or maybe Miss Husna Hakim can help answer this question.
All right, sure. Thank you to, if I'm not mistaken, Alia Hanis. Hanis Alia. Okay. Thank you for the question. So, domestic violence is perpetuated by several societal factors, including, like I mentioned before, gender inequality, traditional belief, and power dynamics in relationship, and the stigmatization of victims. So, as Husna Aisha mentioned before. And in many cultures, the acceptance of violence, whether influenced by historical practices or societal norms, creates an environment where abuse is tolerated or ignored. We can see, for example, I'm sorry, but in a rural area where the fathers is the breadwinner, yeah. So we can see there's some of we can say that it historical behavior, right? Then these factors are not only silence victims but also normalize abusive behavior, making it more challenging to address and prevent in our world right now. So raising awareness is essential in combating these issues. It also helps in challenge outdated beliefs and norms that enable domestic violence, like I mentioned before. And like Husna Aisha mentioned before, when communities are educated about the different forms of abuse, it's physical, emotional, economic, or more, they will gain a deeper understanding of the issue and impact on individuals, families, and society as a whole. So awareness do empowers victim to seek help and knowing they will be supported rather than be judged or being alone. And additionally, it encouraged the development of support system and legal measures to ensure victims have the access to the resources they needed. And for example, education campaign play a transformative role in addressing domestic violence in our education system, like such as through schools and workplace, medias, and community outreach can also help people recognize the sign of abuse and understand that domestic violence is not only limited to physical harm, but also the other harm that I mentioned before. All right. So this awareness also empower victims by informing them about the resources availability, such as shelters, hotlines, or legal assistance. And it's beyond individual empowerment that this campaign may help to challenge the societal norms and make it clear that violence in any form is unacceptable. So breaking the cycle of abuse requires not only supporting survivors, but also addressing the behavior of perpetrators by providing tools and resources. So both survivors and perpetrators education campaign can promote healing and prevent future violence. So the main point here is fostering awareness and educating communities are crucial steps in creating a society where domestic violence is no longer tolerated and where everyone has the right to live free from fear and harm. So I hope I answered the question well, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Husna Hakim. Yeah, that was quite a very clear answer for the question given from our viewer. Okay, next. It's from Dayang. Her name is Dayang. Okay. She asks if there are barriers to implement the laws effectively. I mean, like, I repeat, are there barriers to implement the laws effectively? Okay, I think this question really goes to Mr. Syazwan since it's talk about the law, isn't it? Okay, so please, Mr. Syazwan.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, moderator, for the question. Yes, there are indeed significant barriers to effective implementation of laws regarding domestic violence, and these barriers need to be addressed if we are to create a safer environment for the victims. First of all, lack of awareness among both victims and law enforcement is a major challenge. Many victims are unaware of their rights and how to access legal protection, and this is often compounded by a lack of understanding and sensitivity from law enforcement. Some police officer may not be fully grasp the nuances of domestic violence and or may not be trained to handle sensitive cases with their care they required. Uh, and cultural and societal barriers also play a critical role. In some communities, domestic violence still viewed as a private matter or a family issue, which prevents victims from coming forward. Stigma, fear of retaliation, and the societal belief that family matters should remain internal often silence victims and discourage them from seeking legal resources. Next, resource limit resources limitations within the legal system also contribute to delays in the enforcement of laws. The backlog, the backlog of cases in courts, along with the limited funding for shelters and legal aid centers, often leaves victims in limbo, waiting for justice and protection. Without sufficient resources, the legal system struggles to respond promptly to the needs of survivors. And finally, inconsistent enforcement of protection orders (PO) is another challenge. While the Domestic Violence Act allows courts to issue POs, there have been instances where these orders are not adequately enforced and leaving victims vulnerable. This calls for stricter enforcement practices and better coordination between law enforcement agency and the judiciary to ensure the safety of those under protection. To address this barrier, is crucial that we invest in awareness campaigns, enhance training for law enforcement, and improve access to resources like legal aid and shelters. We also need to create a culture of zero tolerance towards domestic violence and ensuring that laws are not only in place but are effectively enforced. I think that maybe help to answer the question. Back to our moderator.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Syazwan, on explaining the question briefly. Okay, beyond the valuable insights shared, I believe that community support also has a role on this issue where communities should also focus on empowering victims economically and also socially. Okay, the economic empowerment is essential, I think, because financial dependency is often one of the key reasons victims remain in abusive relationship. Like they don't really have money to go seek for help and so on. Okay, so how communities can help? Communities can organize like skill building workshops and also create job opportunities to help victims regain financial independence and also confidence within themselves. Okay, so additionally, I think fostering inclusivity through driving initiatives like support groups, awareness campaigns, and also neighborhoods watch programs can also create a network of trust. So this program does not only provide practical, but it also strengthen community bonds, making it easier for victims to speak up, also seek help without fear of being judged from their surroundings. So I think we may agree on the extension, isn't it, Ms. Husna?
Yes, moderator. We can actually, communities actually have what we call it like a very big role in supporting victims, and like they can, firstly, like the ongoing support during rehabilitation is very crucial, especially among community members. So like providing victims with necessary resources to help rebuild their confidence in lives is actually the key in the healing process. And secondly, fostering an environment free of judgment. Victims, like especially victims, should feel safe and supported in seeking help without fear of being stigmatized. So we as community members should create a safe space where they can come forward freely without they can reach out freely for assistance to prevent recurring violence. And very lastly, it is very important to educate our community members about how to appropriately respond to reports of abuse. One way is actually by implementing an anonymous reporting system. This can actually help encourage victims to come forward knowing they can do so with privacy and protection. Thank you, moderator, for the very insightful points.
So thank you, Ms. Husna on the insight shared again. Okay, so I think that will be last of our discussions. And I wish we could continue today's discussion, but since our panelists have their own prior engagement, so I think that will be it for today's forum discussion. Okay, so as we come to the end of today's discussion, I would like to thank our panelists for spending time sharing the insights on this issue, giving lights on this critical issue of domestic violence. So far, we have explored the importance of recognizing abuse, the role of legal protections or legal systems, and also the support available for the victims. Okay, so everyone, domestic violence is not just a private matter, it's a societal issue that requires awareness, empathy, and also action. It is our responsibility together as a society to create safer spaces, support survivors, and work together to break the cycle of abuse so that we all could live in a harmony life. Okay, and to everyone here, remember that help is always available. If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse or seems to be experiencing this abusive behavior. So please don't hesitate to reach us out to trusted resources or professionals. You can reach us out on multiple help centers from so many platforms, and I truly hope that we all could be responsible together and being sensitive on our surroundings to see if there is victims of this issue. Okay, so as you can see on the screen, there is a phone number we give for anyone who ever need a support or maybe an insight on this issue. Okay, so I would like to thank you all for joining us today, and let's continue to advocate a safer and more supportive society. Okay, there's one Malay phrase I want to share. Okay, so remember Malay's phrase, adat hidup tolong menolong, syariat palu memalu. So thank you everyone. Have a great day ahead, and Assalamualaikum.